the zoom level a bit. And actually, you know, this is one thing that we do see a lot from customers that are using the eShepherd platform on their laptops that maybe have a slightly smaller screen. I've got the luxury here in the office of having a nice big screen in front of me with a very high resolution, so I get to see quite a lot of the property map. And I have got quite a lot of room down here for my animal list, so I can see quite a lot of the details of within the web application, and that's because I've got this nice big screen. But if you are using the web app on a laptop, then I do recommend that you make some adjustments within your browser to adjust the amount of real estate that you've got for your application. So typically in the top right here, there are a few buttons and there's a zoom level that you can adjust. So you can see mine at the moment is set at 125%, so slightly bigger. And if I increase that, you can see now the text becomes larger and everything becomes a little bit bigger. Which I think is great for me sharing my screen so you guys can see it well. But I do recommend on your own laptop that you reduce this zoom level down, right? Because what that will do is allow you to see much more of the details of your animals, and it'll just make things a little bit smaller. So just adjust this zoom level to make it comfortable for you so you can see it, and yet you've got enough real estate, right? So that's a nice little tip just to get us going. So the other area that I wanted to speak about a little bit is this area over here on the top left-hand side. We have a few buttons here, and I think they're a little bit not used very much, right? So the first one that I'll speak to is this little position icon, and really what this one here does is it just resets the zoom level of your map. So I might just deliberately zoom out a little bit and move it to one side. Now I'm going to press this button here. And you can see it just resets the zoom level and brings the map into focus again. So that's a nice handy one to use from time to time when you've been zooming around on the map. And now the one that's more important is this layer icon here. So I'm going to click on that. And now this is where things look a little bit different compared to your application at the moment, because we are introducing a few additional little icons so that it gives you more understanding of what you're seeing on the map. So here in the layers menu, you're able to turn on and off certain things to declutter your map view. So for example, I might go and turn off my watering points, right? Because I've set those, I know where they are now, and maybe while I'm constructing virtual fences or doing other things, I don't want to see them. So if I just go and untick watering points, they all disappear. And similarly, I can do that for virtual paddocks that are inactive. So at the moment, we can see there's a bunch of virtual paddocks here and here that are inactive. If I have a lot of them, then I might want to turn those off and only really focus on the active virtual paddocks that I've got on my animals. Similarly, you could turn off all your physical paddocks that are in the white lines, but yeah, I'm not quite sure whether that makes a lot of sense or not. Now, one thing that is really handy to have a look at is the unfitted neckbands. So by default, they show up as little triangles, any unfitted neckbands, and by default, this layer is turned off. And that's useful most of the time. However, I have seen it from time to time that a customer has put a neckband on that's still unfitted. It hasn't been associated with an animal, so it doesn't show up as one of these round icons. And I can see an unfitted neckband that's walking around in the paddock, right? So you've got it with the rest of your animals. The cow is actually out there in the paddock wearing its neckband, but it's showing up as an unfitted neckband and it hasn't been associated. So Of course, unfitted neckbands don't have active virtual paddocks on them. You can't activate an unfitted neckband. It must be an animal. So turning on this layer allows you to see those unfitted neckbands. If you do happen to have one that's made it out into the paddock and it hasn't been associated, and then you can take some corrective action to turn that unfitted neckband into an animal, right? So that then you can add it to your mob and turn on the virtual paddock. So that's a important one to look out for. Okay, so I'm going to turn a few things back on. So that's really a few things that I wanted to talk about here. The other area that I might just point out, because again, it's one that people generally haven't explored very much, and that is your login icon. So if I hover over my login icon, my name's Andrew Zipson, or Zippo really, but so AZ is for me, that's my account, and there's a settings button here. So I'm going to click on settings, and that brings up this sidebar menu here with the settings, and there are a few things that we can adjust here. So we can adjust the language, and we are continuing to expand our support for different languages. So you can see we've got Spanish, we've got some English for United States, and we've got French Canadian coming on as well. So a few different languages being supported now. You can also switch the units of the measurements on your property, right? So you can be either in metric or imperial, and that will show you your areas in hectares or acres. And it will also change the little numbers that you see when you, the line segment, this next one here, the line segment length will also change from metric to imperial if you slide to imperial. Speaking of the line segment, that is the little indicator that you get when you're drawing a virtual paddock that shows the length of the line segment. So you can turn that on or off if you want. So if you don't want to see what the length of the line is, just toggle this setting, this slider off, and then it won't show it anymore. Although I think most people do like it, and they have enjoyed having that extra feature there. Now, the other thing that I highly recommend that you check is that you've got push notifications enabled for your property. So because I have admin rights to this environment, I can see a lot of properties here, but for most of you, you will only have access to your own property. But then you can enable notifications for your property. And what that means is that you will get notifications sent to your mobile phone app. So if you've got your eShepherd mobile app installed on your mobile phone, and there are some alerts that need to be sent to you, then they will come through on the mobile phone. And you can customize the alerts that you want to receive from this page here as well, right? So you can get some basic animal welfare alerts, and the two alerts that we've got there are the animal is still or down. So that means the animal's not moving. Now, thankfully, we actually don't have many of these alerts come through because an animal has actually perished. The main reason why you might see this alert here is because the neckband has fallen off an animal. So if a neckband has come off an animal, then it is completely still on the ground, and that's when this alert will be triggered and you'll be notified on your mobile phone. The high pulse count alert is a little bit historical and not so useful anymore. This is really from a previous version of the device where containment was not so good, and the neckband would deliver quite a few pulses to try and contain animals. But generally, we don't find that that's the case anymore. And then, look, I won't go too much into detail here, but you can also, choose to have some notifications sent to you when a virtual paddock has been completed, the activation has been completed, or the deactivation has been completed. And this can be really useful if you are if you've turned on a virtual fence and you want to be notified when that has been completed, or vice versa. If you've you've deactivated a virtual paddock because you want to move your animals, but you want to get going already, so you're already moving out into the paddock towards your animals, and you want to get a notification to say when that deactivation has been completed, so that you're sure that you're okay to move your animals out of that virtual paddock. So, okay, so it's a little bit of a long spiel about some of the settings and some of those basic features of the web app. So now I think what we'll do is we'll move on to some questions that we've had from one of our US customers, Chad, around the use of the web app to schedule some virtual paddocks using the scheduling feature, so that we can turn them on in sequence to extend our grazing area. So I think I'll just zoom in on this area. Many of you are already using the virtual fencing platform in this way, where you start off containing your animal in one part of the physical paddock, and then you progressively open up these paddocks. So, sorry, I might just pause there for a second. I thought I heard was there a question, or I think I'll push on.
Zippo, no, I don't think there was a question. I didn't hear one, but one thing I did want to bring up and just give you a breather for 30 seconds, because I know it is quite intense when you're going through all this stuff. One of the questions that I get when talking to potentially eShepherd customers is, what is the main difference between the web application, which is obviously what we're in now, and the actual app? So, you know, in terms of the functionality, obviously the actual app that's on your phone, iPad, or smart device is essentially a cut down version, isn't it? Right. So it's, you know, this is where we do a lot of our heavy lifting, is essentially when we're setting up eShepherd for the first time, isn't it, Zippo? We're jumping on here and we're starting to build our paddocks. Can you just quickly run through a little bit of the difference between, you know, when we particularly use the platform on our laptop versus what we do on our, I guess, our iPad? You know, I talk about it like heavy lifting on the laptop or the home PC, and then of course the cut down version, which is got some similar functionality but limited to some degrees, more of a maintenance and monitoring functionality on the actual app on your phone. So, you know, essentially we're going to have access to all, aren't we?
Yeah, look, that's absolutely right. So the web application certainly has had the most development, right, and it is has the most features. So, you know, we do use for all of that initial setup, and even right now, we still have to use the web application to create your virtual paddocks, to draw your virtual paddocks and create your mobs. But we are working hard to achieve what we call feature parity, where the mobile phone application will have exactly the same capabilities as the web application that you use on your laptop. So, yeah, there will be over this year, right, we will continue to develop the mobile application. Certainly right now there's work in progress to create the ability to draw virtual paddocks on the mobile phone. That's a feature that many of you have requested, so that's being developed right now. And hopefully we will send out a version of that very soon. Again, your mobile phone, you will usually get updated automatically as these things are released, depending on the settings that you have on your mobile phone. So, yep, absolutely. At the moment, still there is a lot of work that you can do and need to do on the web application, on your browser-based application that you use on your laptop. But the mobile phone application is catching up fast with features.
And the great thing, Zippo, of course, with our, you know, being in the cloud, we don't need to download any software or install anything on our PC. For those users that are just coming on in the next couple of months, it's simply a login. So if you are out of reach of your house and you need to jump on someone else's PC or laptop because you've got to attend to something urgently, of course you can just log in, as long as you've got your credentials there, your email address and your password to log in. And then of course you've always got the actual app on your phone.
That's right. Yep. Perfect.
Perfect, excellent. Well, that's great. That's a really great start, Zippo. And I'm assuming you're going to start to run through some of the functionality on the right-hand side of the web application.
That's right. That's right. Yep. So again, maybe just before I delve into using the application to schedule some virtual paddocks for this blue mob of animals here, our heifers mob, I might just run through again the basics of the application. So really, we've got all of our menus down on the right-hand side here. So these are the main menus, and they will open up their corresponding side panel. So if I click on mobs, this is what we call our side panel. It opens up the mobs side panel. Now, there are a couple of things I can do. I can actually extend the side panel. So if for some reason you don't have enough real estate here, you can make it a little bit bigger, or you can leave it at the default size, or you can even collapse it all together, right? And this can be a little bit confusing at times if you've collapsed it and you're expecting to do something. So you might be wondering, well, what do I do now? I'm in the mobs menu. So do make sure that if you are in this view and your side panel is gone altogether, you do need to bring it back out if you want to actually take action in some form. So all right, let's jump down to the virtual paddock menu, because maybe we'll just talk about this for a moment as well. I think most of you are familiar with the creation of virtual paddocks now, and you've probably noticed some changes that we've made recently where we are now putting all of the virtual paddocks that you're creating into a little subfolder that is named after the physical paddock that they have been drawn in. So, for example, all of these paddocks here, which are these East 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're all in the cooler paddock, which is this physical paddock over here. And I can collapse them if I'm not interested in working with these paddocks at the moment. So just a bit of an improvement on how we manage our virtual paddocks, because certainly for many of you that are using the platform intensively, you've got a lot of virtual paddocks, and it's becoming a little bit more challenging to keep them organized and nice and neat. So there will be future improvements to this again as well. I'm managing lots of virtual paddocks, but for the time being, let's now discuss how. Well, actually, before I move on,
Zippo, we've got a question which I'm happy to read out on your behalf, Zippo. So it's from Jeff Dill. Welcome, Jeff. Thanks for your question. And as I said at the start, we want to keep this raw and real. So if people have got concerns or they've got questions to improve their use and functionality, we're going to go through those. So Jeff has said that creating virtual paddocks is a little cumbersome and time consuming. A feature to show the area within a paddock as it is being drawn will be very beneficial on making it more efficient. So that's part one of the question. And the other suggestion is to make a pie tool to lay over a pie tool to add virtual paddocks running out from the water. So, So first part of the question is the area, Zippo?
Let's have a look at that, right? So we might just go and draw another virtual paddock in this area here. So I'm in the virtual paddock menu. I'm going to just press the create button. And look, one of the things that I recommend a lot for creating virtual paddocks from scratch is to start with a really basic shape. So I'm just going to draw a box, right? I'm going to draw this box here, and I've closed the shape. So I did that very quickly, right? I dropped the 4 fence posts, if you like, and I close that shape by clicking back on the first point that I drew, right? So now you can see my mouse has let go, and I'm no longer drawing any more nodes. But now I start to refine my shape, right? So I find this the easiest way to create virtual paddocks. So I can drag the nodes around, or the fence posts. I can move them around by just clicking on them and dragging them. So I can start refining the shape. And if I want to drop more fence posts, if you like, or add more nodes, I can just click anywhere on any part of the line and add another fence post to make exactly the shape that I want for my virtual paddock. So you can see how easy it is. If I get onto a physical fence, this fence post snaps to it. So it's kind of nice to be able to align certain features. Let's say if you do want to follow your virtual fence line over the top of your physical fence line, well, then it's easy to kind of snap onto that. And maybe you've created a few too many fence posts and you want to pull them up again. So it's really easy to do that as well by simply clicking on the point again. So I just bring my mouse over it, click on top of it, and it disappears, right? And it goes away. So you can see that's the easiest way to manipulate your virtual paddocks. You can see here these red nodes where you've that appear where there's an error, and the error is well, it tells you what the error is, why it's complaining about this particular location, and that is because the interior angle must be greater than 80 degrees. And that the reason why we don't allow sharp corners like this is that if an animal comes down into a sharp corner and the virtual paddock is active, then any animal that interacts with this virtual fence segment, it might get audio tones from this virtual fence segment, and the animal might turn away, do the right thing, turn away, but turn straight into the next virtual fence segment. So that can become a little bit confusing and challenging for the animal to find its way out of that corner. So we don't allow that. So the easiest way to fix that is to just cut off the corner by creating another point. So, and that cut-off section can be quite small. Now I'm on a very large property here, so even when I just cut off a corner like that, it's still 30 meters long. But I think you can have this small segment as short as like 5 meters, and that's enough for an animal to be able to negotiate its way out of a tight situation like that. So very easy to address little errors that come up when you are creating a sharp corner.
And I think Zippo. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say, Zippo, that would be a good rule of thumb when we're doing our training periods as well. Did you just want to touch on that? When we're training our animals, we don't want to put them under too much pressure. And, having sharp corners, particularly or laneways and things like that, is probably a bit of a no-go for that first, 10 to 14 days.
That's right. Yeah, really good point, Mark. Certainly you want to, during the training period when you're introducing animals, just think about your animals and what they're going through. They are having to learn a lot of new stuff, just like you are, right? You are also going through a learning period in the beginning, learning on how to do all these new things. The animals do need to figure out, okay, when I come to the virtual fence line segment and I hear the audio tone right in the beginning, they won't know what that's all about. So they'll step over it and get a pulse, and it will take them a number of interactions. I mean, I'm surprised how quickly they do learn this, but be patient with them and keep things really simple. Keep things as simple as you can, so that it's simple for your animals, right? To understand, okay, when I hear the audio tones, I just need to turn away, pull back a little bit from that space, and then I can avoid getting a pulse. And once they understand that, right, then you get that fantastic containment. So, and you can make more complicated boundaries. So, yeah, but be patient in the beginning.
And Zippo, I think a good opportunity now, given that we have got so many new customers coming on board, 20 seconds, your rule of thumb with the design of a virtual paddock for the training period.
Yep. So really, okay. Look, I've nearly finished this shape here. Well, I have. So I'm gonna press save on this, but I might make some changes to this as just to go over those rules of thumbs for the training paddock. So no, I'm going to just continue on with this one. Sorry, I'll do a 180 here. So, rule of thumb for training paddocks, right? What we want to do is give the animals plenty of space to be able to graze without constantly running into a virtual fence boundary. But we also want to limit the amount of space that they have if they were to not find their way into the virtual paddock. If they've responded in the wrong direction, we don't want them them to spend a long time in an exclusion zone, right, outside of the virtual paddock before they come back in. So the rule of thumb is try and break your physical paddock up into 2/3 of an inclusion zone and 1/3 of an exclusion zone. Now, if your physical paddock is very large and that is impractical, then and especially for your mob size, then you can make a smaller inclusion zone. But the recommendation in such a case would be to run a temporary electric fence, maybe 5 or 10 meters, 15 feet or so from your virtual fence line, so that, again, if animals do find themselves outside of the virtual fence, they won't spend a lot of time out here before returning into the virtual paddock, at which point the neckband will resume the virtual fencing activity and will apply the audio tones at the virtual fence boundary if they try and escape again. The other thing that I would say about the training period is there are a few things. I would start off with the other virtual fence boundaries outside of your physical fence boundaries. So they're only interacting with the boundaries that are on the, this one virtual fence boundary here through the middle of the paddock. And you want to keep that nice and simple without too many obstructions in the way, so animals have a clear way of responding to that simple virtual fence line and moving back into the inclusion zone. So in the beginning, in the first few days, maybe leave your other virtual fence boundaries away from the physical fences. But after 1 or 2 days, once the animals have had a few opportunities to interact with the fence, then you can go and put those virtual fences on top of the physical fences. So, in fact, let me demonstrate the best way to do that, right? So let's say this is our training paddock on the proviso that we've got a temporary electric fence running across here so that the animals don't run off into the never for too long, right? So I'm going to save this paddock. And now let's say after a few days, I want to overlay these virtual fence segments onto the physical fence. So the easiest way to do that is I select the existing fence, and this fence will be an active fence at that time, and I'm going to take a copy of it, right? So if I copy that fence, now I start off already with the fence that we had previously, and you can see there's the old one lying underneath it. And now I'm just going to move those nodes onto the physical fence. So by just making some adjustments like this. There we go. So now I've created a copy of it. I'm going to save that. So this next virtual fence, I can turn this fence on now. So there's no turning off any fences, right? Let's assume at the moment this fence is active on your training animals. And now you will simply say, okay, well, time to go and make things a little bit more interesting and give them more opportunities to interact with the virtual fence as they approach the physical fence. So you can simply switch from this virtual fence to the smaller virtual fence that has the boundaries overlaid. So you turn that one on, and the neck bands will get updated with that virtual fence geometry. So
perfect,
that's some of the guidelines for training. And hopefully that's answered some of the questions as well around drawing virtual paddocks.
Yes, the questions are starting to come a bit thicker and faster now, Zippo, which is exactly what we want. So we might just cruise through these and make sure that we have covered off. So first one is from Megan Willis, our friend Megan. Welcome, Megan. Thank you for your contribution so far. Good to have you on board this morning. Does the platform keep records of which paddocks were activated on which dates? How long animals grazed within the paddock and which animals were in those mobs? So essentially a record of our virtual paddocks, our grazing patterns, and also where those animals have been.
Yeah. So, look, we do have our status menu here. So, again, I'm on the right-hand side. I've gone down to status, and this does give you a record of when a certain virtual paddock was turned on, and when it may have been overwritten as well with a new virtual paddock, indicating when the previous one was turned off. So there is a record here, and that record will goes on for quite some time. It's not a completely perfect scenario in terms of managing or knowing exactly what grazing you've done in which paddock and at what time. Again, this is an area that we are looking into to make this a little bit more of a grazing platform. So okay, I had my heifers mob in this area for X number of days before moving it on to another part of the pasture. So there will be some improvements coming in this area as well. But at the moment, there is this basic record here. And while we are looking at this page, I might just mention, this. Many of you will be familiar with this little status or progress bar here. During the transition of one virtual paddock to the next virtual paddock, you will see that this progress bar will start to go from 0, towards 100% as the system is sending the messages to the neck bands. And we have received confirmation from the neck bands back to say, yes, I have the virtual paddock, and as those confirmations come in, the progress bar here on the side will start to increase, right? So once the progress has gone to 100%, that's when we know we've heard from every single one of the neck bands in this group that now they're on the new virtual paddock. And remember, during this transition, you'll also see 2 virtual paddocks that are active. So you know what? Let's do a very quick demonstration of that. So I'm going to turn on the next virtual paddock in this sequence for the heifers. And you can see, right, these are just we're just increasing the amount of pasture that they have access to, allowing animals to back graze and come to this water point here. So I'm going to select the heifers mob to turn on the next virtual paddock. I'm going to go to turn on VP down the bottom here. I want to do that now. And I'm going to go and find the correct paddock. So you can see as I hover over these paddocks, it highlights them on the map. So I can see which one I'm selecting. I know, yes, Davies 02 is the correct virtual paddock that I want. I'm going to select that one. I'm going to turn it on. Now, on this demo property, we have a little script that's actually generating these animals and updating them. But you can see right now we've got 2 active virtual paddocks that are being shown. This is normal and to be expected. So because, right, it isn't instantaneous. The transition from one virtual paddock to the next virtual paddock does not happen instantaneously. The platform needs to send out the message to say, hey, here is some new virtual paddock geometry to these neck bands. And then each of those neck bands needs to have received that message and sent a confirmation back to the platform to say, hey, I've got the new virtual paddock. So during that transition, and that transition can take anywhere from half an hour to maybe even 1.5 hours or more, depending on your communication cadence, which maybe we can talk about in a little bit. But it can take a little while before all of those transitions have been made. And then the previous virtual paddock, once this progress bar has gone to 100%, the previous virtual paddock will automatically become an inactive virtual paddock.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to mention there, Zippo. And just to sort of clarify a little bit what Zippo's talking about in his great explanation there. So previously we had 30-minute updates to the cloud, but because we have really great sun, particularly in Australia, I found with our customers, we've switched over to a 10-minute cadence. And the difference is when we've got good sun, we're obviously going to have extra battery being able to handle the more regular updates. So potentially if you've got really good signal strength to your neck bands, you can get 10-minute updates. So, a change from one virtual paddock to another to updating all those animals may take 3 cycles, generally is a rule of thumb, which may take that 30 minutes. If you're on a 30-minute cadence and your signal strength is poorer, obviously it's going to be harder to push that data down to the neck bands. So it may take a little bit longer. So sometimes it's just a case of waiting and seeing, and obviously you can see the progress of your animals updated on the platform there to see when they're getting that new information. So it can vary a little bit, and all I can say to customers where it is taking a little bit longer is just have that little bit of patience when the animals are getting a new virtual paddock. Sometimes it may take longer than that half an hour.
Yeah. No, great. And look, the last thing maybe I will say around this topic is that, yeah, we do understand some of the pain points around this virtual paddock activation time, right? I know that it can cause a little bit of confusion for some animals, that if some animals have already received the new allocation and they've got access to the fresh pasture, and other animals are still on the old virtual paddock and they can't access the fresh pasture yet. That can cause a little bit of confusion and a bit of tension for those animals. We are aware of this. And again, it is something that is high up on our development plan to address that and bring further improvements to the system. So, give us a little while. We'll have some more updates coming out for both your neckbands and the platform to be able to do that in a more elegant way. So those features are coming.
Zippo, I'm just going to jump in there quickly. So first of all, this is really great stuff. I'm seeing, I'm learning some stuff myself as well. And I will say to everybody that are first-time users of eShepherd, this can be a little bit overwhelming. It's like any technology, whether it's, learning to use an iPhone for the first time back in the day, or whether it's eShepherd. But be assured there is plenty of support and there's tons of training videos, which Zippo will go through where to locate those in a minute. But we have got 15 minutes left. One thing I do want to get from you guys, our audience, our wonderful customers, if you don't mind just putting in the chat, given that we have covered, a significant amount of information, but there's so much more to learn. If you would like to see these training webinars more often than monthly, because we're just sort of waiting and seeing what you guys want. If you want it more regularly, say fortnightly, we're happy to take that feedback and jump on maybe fortnightly, particularly if we've got lots of new customers. If you think you're only going to make monthly, we'll make monthly. So if you don't mind just putting those comments in the chat, good and bad, how often you'd like to see the training, that would be really helpful for us so we can schedule more training for you guys. And just before we move on, Zippo, I have got a few more questions. I'd like to try and at least get through some of them, if not
sure.
Just very quickly. So I know Catherine, thank you, Catherine, has been answering a few questions as well. Another question from Megan. She has said, and you may have covered this, I'm just covering off these, Zippo, can the corner cutoff method be used to create rounded or contoured exclusion zones for managing landscape challenges?
Yes, absolutely. And look, I kind of was, maybe I'll go back to these virtual paddocks that I drew down here, because I started doing that a little bit just on autopilot. So I might just go back into our virtual paddock menu and delve into a little bit more detail around some of that stuff. And I'll go with the second one that I have created. So you can get very detailed with how you want to either exclude certain areas of the paddock or the shape that you're drawing. Essentially, you can get a lot of detail into it. Now, I by default kind of made this big exclude or a big circle around where the watering point is, and this is always something that I stress and I recommend that customers do. Right, if you do not need to, then please put your virtual fence boundaries well away from the watering point. And the reason for that is, we just don't want animals getting audio tones or pulses when they're coming into water. So if, for example, your troughs were very close to your physical fences and animals came in to drink, you certainly don't want to give them any stimulus at that point. So please give a large berth around that area so that that never happens. By and large, the accuracy of the neckband, the location accuracy of the neckband is now really good. Like, we're talking sub 1 meter, that's sub a few feet most of the time. However, there is the odd occasion where the reception from GPS satellites is poor, or we have a transition in the constellation of the GPS satellites, right? So they're constantly moving around the sky, and some satellites disappear out of view and other ones are coming into view. And the neckband is connecting to maybe 15, 20, or even 30 of those satellites at any one time to try and get a really accurate location. But nonetheless, there are times when we get an erroneous location signal, right, where the neckband might accidentally start beeping, even though the animal isn't near the virtual fence boundary. So if you can, if your design allows, then just put a nice big berth around the watering point to make sure that that's not a concern.
Perfect.
And then right.
So,
hopefully I've
sorry,
demonstrated how you can throw in a whole lot of fence posts as well to draw all sorts of interesting shapes. Similarly, in the inclusion zone, if there was something that you wanted to avoid, you can go and make some shape around it. Now, do note that down the bottom here, you do have some indications, and this is actually a question that came up earlier, and we didn't really address it, but there is some areas are being defined for you right now. So you see the total area of the virtual paddock as I've drawn it, and you can see it's pretty darn big. This is a property in Queensland, but anyway, never mind about the scale too much. Now, that total area includes some parts that are outside of this physical fence. So you actually do get the grazing area as well, which is 148 hectares, which is the intersection between this virtual fence boundary, as I've drawn it, and the physical fence boundary. So you do have an indication of the allocations that you're giving. And then finally, you'll see the available number of points or fence posts, and we can run out of those, right? So if you are drawing a very complex shape and you're using up all of those nodes, then, that countdown, you can see the IZ counter continues to go down the more nodes I add or fence posts that I add. And once you run out of those posts, then, well, you need to try and simplify your shape to continue refining it, right? So again, you might want to just get rid of a few of those fence posts, especially if they're not needed. Like in this case, this particular line segment is nearly straight anyway, so I probably don't need this point here, and maybe I don't even need this one, right? So you can just remove them by clicking on them again to save fence posts.
Yep, Zippo, I've got a question from Pamela. Thank you, Pamela, about exclusion zones. Zippo, I was wondering if you could just jump into one of your virtual paddocks there and just give us a quick demo if you've got an exclusion zone within an actual paddock. So you might have a waterway, you might have some sheds, some infrastructure, or even, a bore with a tank around it that you want to exclude. If you don't mind just giving us a quick demo on that. And the question is, tried to put an exclusion zone around a rainwater tank, but the system wouldn't allow it because there was no water point in the EZ exclusion zone.
Okay. Yeah, okay. All right, so let's do that. Let's see if we can recreate that scenario. So I've started a new virtual paddock. So I've done a very standard. I'm in the virtual paddock menu. I've said create virtual paddock, and by default on the left-hand side here, you'll see by default I'm in the inclusion zone feature, right? I'm drawing the inclusion zone at the moment. And that is the default mode, right? But now I want to add an exclusion zone to this paddock here, right? So, and maybe I can see there's some sort of a dark shaded area. So let's just assume we want to exclude animals out of here. So I have closed the basic shape of my inclusion zone, right? It is now a closed polygon, and you can see my mouse no longer has any attachment to the inclusion zone fence. So at this point, I can directly jump over into the exclusion zone and start defining my exclusion zone, right? So I'm going to start drawing this exclusion zone around this shaded part of the paddock. Maybe it's a wet area or a sensitive area. And again, I get I get some 30 points, fence posts that I can use to define my exclusion zone within that is within the inclusion zone. So that is one a requirement at the moment, is that your exclusion zone that you're drawing is within an inclusion zone, right? So you got a bit of a tongue twister. You got your head around that. So now I've drawn my exclusion zone. There are a few rules around this again as well. So, for example, let me try and violate some of these rules by going a bit closer to my inclusion zone. So if I try and create a very narrow boundary between my inclusion zone and my exclusion zone, it says that, no, look, you've got to have at least 100 metres of clearance around it. Now, that's quite a bit of distance, right, that you've got to create between your inclusion zone and your exclusion zone. Again, as we get more experience from customers around using these features, we might adjust some of those rules, but at the moment, you do need to leave a good bit of space between the two boundaries so animals can navigate through it very easily. But that is how you create an exclusion zone. And now if I go and save that, right, after I've fiddled with it and I'm happy with it, I can go and save this. And now what you'll see is that this virtual paddock, when I click on it and select it in my list here, it shows both the inclusion zone, which is a large boundary, and the exclusion zone. Now, there was a comment around a watering point not being in there. I've, again, deliberately set it outside of any definitions or any defined watering points. And I might just reiterate the message about that, right? So watering points at the moment, we require one watering point to be defined inside the inclusion zone, and it is really just to make sure that you have thought about where animals will have access to water, so that you don't fence them off your water source, right? So if you haven't dropped a watering point marker in a virtual paddock and you try and turn it on, you will get a message, a warning to say, hey, you're about to fence your animals off water. And in fact, let me see if I can do that quickly. I'll just select my entire heifers mob and say, I want to turn on that paddock. And I'm going to go down to this new paddock that I've drawn. I'm going to say, turn that on now. So here's the warning that comes up, right? It says, potential risk to animals. Be aware that some of the following conditions may affect your animals. So first of all, some animals are located outside of the VP, and that is because, right, all of my heifers are way down in the other part of the paddock, so it's telling you they're all very far away from the virtual paddock that you're about to turn on. Are you sure you want to do this, right? And the other warning I get is that this VP has no watering point, right? So, and it says, are you sure you want to proceed? So this is, at this stage, just a warning. It doesn't stop you from doing it. You can still turn this virtual paddock on, but, it's a prompt to make sure that you understand what you're doing, right, and you're aware of what's about to happen. So, yep, if you don't have the watering point in there, still allows you to turn it on.
That's perfect, Zippo. So we're approaching the 1 hour mark. I'm going to, Zippo, hit a couple of more questions which sort of relate to exclusion zones, and then we'll just do a bit of a wrap. Fully appreciate everyone's comments. Overwhelming amount of questions, which obviously we're not going to get through today, but that's okay. So we're going to go and have a bit of a debrief after this and make sure we address all those questions and get back to you guys, and also use that information to help sort of shape the next webinar training session. And just, Zippo, what's really interesting here is that more people than not are saying fortnightly. So we'll have a bit of a chat about that once we finish today and where to from here. Absolutely. No, it's great, Zippo. It's really valuable. A couple more questions. Chilwell Farms. So one of our good customers in WA, Dan Walker. Thank you, Dan. Your question is there going to be a function to add more exclusion zones within a paddock? And to follow that, is there going to be an option of adding exclusion zones to an active cell without having to deactivate the paddock, wait for that to be passed on, create zone, then reactivate, Zippo?
Yeah. Now, look, really good question. And yes, we've thought there's a lot of a lot of effort is going into reimagining how we do exclusion zones with the neckband. There's been a lot of talk about permanent exclusion zones, right? So instead of only being able to define one exclusion zone within an inclusion zone, then we are working on the capability of you being able to draw exclusion zones on your property, and then you don't need to even worry about whether when you're drawing a virtual paddock, you don't need to worry about drawing an exclusion zone at all, because you've already predefined a permanent exclusion zone. So if there's even some sort of an intersection, so let me try and demonstrate that with what I've drawn over here. So let's say you draw a virtual paddock like this, and you have your animals in this part of the paddock here. I'll just try and zoom in on this a little bit. So animals are in this part of the paddock. There's a virtual fence boundary that they're interacting with here, but let's assume this is now one of these new permanent exclusion zones. Well, the system will know that actually your virtual fence boundary runs along here, right? So it will exclude the animal from being able to go into this permanent exclusion zone as well. So that's something, again, that's on the development horizon. Some of these things do take some time to, put into the smarts of the neckband. Many of the challenges come from the very tiny little communication packages that are available to us to be able to send information to and from the neckband, right? So these are, it's not a broadband internet connection that our neckbands have with the internet. So the messages that we can send and receive from the system are very small, and we have to be very mindful of that. And that is why we even have the limitations around the number of fence posts that you can use at the moment. You know, if there was an infinite amount of data that we could send backwards and forwards, well, then, you could send as many fence posts as you would like. But the messages are very small and tiny, so there's some limitations around that, and it requires some very clever engineers to work out ways around those limitations. But be assured that we're all working at it.
No, that's great, Zippo. So we're just about out of time, and I'm thinking we're not going to get through all these questions today, but it's fantastic food for thought for us, and to know where you guys are at with your questions and, I guess, your pain points and what's working well. So thank you so much for all your feedback. One more thing, Zippo, I guess, if we can set a little task for our eShepherd customers, could you just walk us through quickly the self-help menu, which is a really good, I guess, training platform or a place where customers can go, even if you're an existing customer and you've been on 6 months or you're coming on now. If you notice in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little round circle with a question. Yeah, I'll let you take over and showcase all your good work there, Zippo.
I actually jumped over there a bit too hastily. So, let me point out two of the help functions, right? So, first of all, the one Mark just spoke to, the help center, right? This question mark, I'll click on it in a second, but it will take you over into the help center, and I will spend a moment going through that. But many of you have already seen our little chatbot as well, right? Now, this is an AI tool that we are trying out, right? And we have fed it a lot of information about the eShepherd platform. There's a really horrible icon that's meant to look a little bit like me, but I'm not sure that it does. Anyway, look, so this chatbot is reasonably good at giving some quick responses to questions that you might have, but it isn't super accurate yet, right? It's like many of those AI tools that are coming onto the market. We are constantly trying to improve it, and with your questions that you put into this chatbot, right, we see those questions and we can go and improve the answers that the chatbot is giving every time it gets it wrong. So it is a learning tool, a learning AI tool, and hopefully in time this will be able to give you very accurate and correct answers and responses. So, but please bear with us. It's not super accurate at this point yet. But, AI is taking over the world, so what do we do? Now, okay, so over to the Help Center. If I click on that, it takes me to the help.eShepherd.com. And in here, right, there's a lot of the help guides that I've created so far. So if you need any help using the eShepherd web app, if you click on here, there's a whole lot of different articles on how to do different things. Yeah, we continue to work on these articles as well, and the videos that are within here. I know many of you have found the introduction to the eShepherd web app, right, where yeah, give a quick run through on this YouTube video on how the platform works. And again, there's a bit of a written spiel about some of the main features as well. And so, look, if you are struggling with any features, please jump in here first and go and have a look to see if you can find the video on it, because yeah, that will allow you to pause the video, go and have a look at how you're supposed to do certain things on the eShepherd web app, so you can follow along with it at the same time, and practice doing the things that we go through in some of these. If there is anything that you would really like to see in this help center that is missing, please reach out to us and let us know. As I said, right, we're constantly evolving and we're constantly adding more content. But if there's something that you really need, then please let us know. Send an email to the support address, which, by the way, right, you can find now if you go to contact us. So you can click on contact us. It'll take us to this page here. You'll see here's our eShepherd support email address. That email address now goes to the customer support team. So we've got people now over in the US, in New Zealand, and here in Australia that will answer those emails. So we're trying to be as responsive as we can with our relatively small team still to answer your questions via email. And now just recently we've brought online some phone numbers that you can call as well, right? So for your region, you can see these phone numbers here. These are typically the standard Gallagher numbers, and there'll be an option, right? You'll need to listen to the options that are presented to you. So, for example, in New Zealand, you need to press 4 to speak to an eShepherd representative or to be put through to the eShepherd team. So you can try out these phone numbers as well. Again, this is a system that we've just brought online, so there's still a few little teething issues that we're sorting out with it, but certainly try and call us on these numbers as well, and we'll be there to support you.
Perfect, Zippo. No, that's fantastic, and thank you for showing us through the platform. Obviously, again, there's tons of functionality there. Virtual fencing is relatively new in the scale of things in ag tech, and our mission is beyond just selling the solution, providing the solution. It's really trying to provide you guys with all the support you can, getting you guys as skilled as you can, and essentially getting the most out of the system. We want you to wring its neck. We want you to absolutely maximise, but don't be too hard on yourselves. Give yourselves time to learn the program. Give yourselves the animals time to learn. And I guess generally the feedback that I'm getting from the customers and AU is that we can't believe how easy this stuff is. So even though there's a lot of information there's a lot of functionality, start with the basics, get your animals trained well, don't rush that training process, and then start to explore the additional functionality. You've got the eShepherd customer support, which even if you're in one time zone, it will hit various people, so potentially you will hear back from another person in another region, particularly. So if you get an email back from someone who's not your general customer service representative or customer success representative, that's why. We've got the business development managers and customer engagement people, myself and the others. You can find all our details on the web if you don't have them already, and of course all your questions, we'll collate those and do our best to get some responses back to you in a timely fashion. I've been asked several times also about the recording. We aim to get those out to people, and remember guys, this is our first one, so Zippo and I and the team sat down and said, how are we going to do this? And we thought, you know what, we're just going to delve in and see what the feedback from you guys, which has so far been fantastic. So we really appreciate your attendance, and I would encourage you to keep coming. Hopefully we'll do them fortnightly. We'll just have a look at our calendars and just see what works, and we'll be in touch to get those meeting invites also out to you. And I do encourage you, bring a friend. If you've got a mate that's come over to give you a hand for the day, or you've got a family member, or you've got other people within your circle who potentially will be helping you. I know I've got customers who are got kids at boarding school that are assisting mum and dad doing the hard yakka from 300 kilometres away at boarding school. So, you know, your imagination's your own, I guess. Again, thank you. Thanks, Zippo. Thanks the rest of you for coming, and we'll get some more information out to you and some further updates on our next webinar. That's it from me. Zippo, have you got anything else to add?
No, look, it's a wrap. That's fantastic. Yep, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Happy to do it again.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks, guys. Be safe,
Okay.
and we'll see you on the next one.
Yep, have a great day. See ya.
See ya.
Good night.